I'm Russell Shimooka with this UNN breaking news update surrounding the H1N1 flu pandemic. The National Centers for Disease Control reports the pandemic is spreading widely.
At the end of the day, this is about a threat to the homeland.
When we're talking about a pandemic, we're not talking about a one-time event.
Researchers are working around the clock to identify the possible new strain and vaccine.
It's pretty critical right now.
H1N1, public enemy number one. The so-called swine flu has spread with unprecedented speed that many hospitals and clinics have been overwhelmed testing and treating patients. The World Health Organization says the virus is at pandemic proportion.
When we're talking about a pandemic, we're not talking about a one-time event like a hurricane or a natural disaster where the disaster strikes and then it's all about recovery afterwards. We're talking about an ongoing long-term event.
And over the long term, people get sick and die. In the Pacific region, great efforts are being taken in the way of planning, training, and preparing for a massive outbreak. Joint Task Force-Homeland Defense was created in 2004. The mission of this multi-service unit: conduct defense support of civil authorities' operations for all hazards responding to and recovering from man-made or natural disasters.
And at the end of the day, this is about a threat to the homeland. Whether this threat be an illness, whether it be a hurricane, or an earthquake, or some other man-made disaster, an act of terrorism, or something like this, one of our primary missions is to protect the homeland, so we are prepared to do that.
Joint Task Force-Homeland Defense is prepared to assist civil authorities within the Pacific Command to include the state of Hawaii, territories like Guam and American Samoa, Commonwealth nations like the Mariana Islands, and the compact nations like Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and Palau. During a pandemic, the federal government, through its Military and Emergency Management Agency, better known as FEMA, provides support in the areas of disease surveillance, laboratory diagnostics, response teams, vaccines, medical equipment and supplies, patient treatment, transportation of the ill and injured, quarantine enforcement, support of local law enforcement, and mortuary services.
It really boils down to the agency, government agency, making sure they're very clear on the type of support and capability that they're looking for, so that my staff can analyze that and see if we are capable of providing that, or if we need to go out to some other agency to provide that particular support.
We understand that the Pacific Command and U.S. Army Pacific both have significant personnel resources. Of course, their first priority may be protection of their forces, but if they do have the people, human resources, the material resources available to us, then we would appreciate their assistance during this kind of pandemic.
In Guam's only 100 people, maybe. Wheeler Air Force Base, I guess the 4 aircraft controllers didn't show up to work today. Well, that's important for him to know.
Operation Lightning Rescue is the annual exercise that tests the capabilities of Joint Task Force-Homeland Defense. Whether it's a staff exercise involving computer simulation or a mock influenza outbreak aboard a jet airliner involving dozens of local first responders, JTF-HD continues to improve its quick assessment and response to the crisis, extending the federal helping hand to those who need it most.
Some people have the perception that DOD is just going to come and save the day, and that's not necessarily the case. We're going to do the best with what we've got. We're going to share the wealth, as it were. But at the end of the day, we want to mitigate human suffering and make sure that we are good stewards of the operation here, make sure everybody's taken care of best of our ability.
One way that's being done is through the already successful Subject Matter Expert Program. While conducted annually, exchanging information on a variety of public safety issues, during a pandemic, teams deploy to areas where the Defense Department's presence is at its very least.
It allows us to engage forward with our JOA, our Joint Operations Area partners and stakeholders in the Pacific, to provide advice and assistance as we can with a small team, between 8 to 10 people, and then to communicate back to us what the potential requirements and an assessment from what the situation is in the area that we're visiting.
It's that vital information and rapid response that could be crucial in saving lives. So what can state and local agencies expect when Joint Task Force-Homeland Defense is brought into the picture? They'll get a trained and dedicated professional staff, all with the passion and sense of duty to help their fellow man in a time of need. Partnering with local and state counterparts, JTF Homeland Defense routinely shares new information and works diligently on improving lines of communication, shortening response times, keeping supplies flowing, mitigating human suffering, and being that calm in the midst of a storm.